everybody, Karen Burchill here. Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to make a multi-layered masterboard. Here it is, isn't it beautiful? And then we're going to take part of this and make not one, but two cards. So I'm working on an 11 by 17 piece of copy paper as my base, and I'm pulling out, I've got some golden papers, some tissue papers, music papers, odds and ends. All I knew when I started today was I wanted to do kind of peach, coral, and teal mint kind of colors with some yellow in it. So my goal here is I'm just going to rip up these pieces, arrange them, and glue them down. I'm using gel medium to glue them down, and I found a stash of golden gel medium or Liquitex gel medium in my stash, so I am using that. It's a little bit more liquidy than the other one that I use, and it works well for this process. I want to make sure everything is completely adhered down, so I'm putting some under and over. I'm layering this up. I'm not even too worried about straight edges. A masterboard, you create the whole thing, but you don't know exactly which end is going to be up, what part you're going to use. So you have complete creative freedom, and it's a great thing to do when you are stuck. Pick a color, couple colors, find some collage papers, and just glue it down. You can't help but break through any kind of creative block. So the papers I'm ripping up right now, those were ones I made at Christmas. They're kind of Christmas themed, but they had that teal color. So I'm going to put them down. Some of this is going to show through to the end. Little bits all of them are peeking through. Some gets pushed back. All of it makes for interesting layers. And because I'm layering pieces of paper on top of pieces of paper, you're also getting texture. I like using the 11 by 17 paper because it allows me to, I could do a full-size art journal page with it, as well as some ATCs or different ones. So it gives me enough to do multiple projects. Lately, if you've watched all my latest videos, you'll know that I'm working on using things in my stash, things that have been laying around on my table. I'm just using them up. And a masterboard is a great way to take all those things and put them down and use them. Turn it into something that you will then be able to use. And then if not, you have one piece of paper as opposed to oodles of other ones. I'm not too worried if there's some white space coming through, because I know the next layers I'm going to add some stenciling and some stamping, and that's going to maybe fill in some of those areas, and I'm okay with having a little bit of white space as well. So once I glue all this down, it takes a bit of time for it to dry, and I'm checking, making sure everything is perfectly adhered. I'm really liking this right now, but I know I'm going to add more layers, and that sometimes is difficult for us to do because we're afraid that we may wreck it. You can use magazine pictures. There could be things with text on them. You can use advertisements that you get in the mail, junk mail. Something that has color, something that has text. So now I'm starting the stenciling, and this is scattered branches, and I'm using white paint through it. Now the stenciling that we're going to do is just going to draw everything together. My goal here is just taking the stencil and just having it everywhere. This is adding movement to the page and a little bit more pattern. It knocks back some of the others, but the hard edges of all those collage pieces somewhat disappear. Don't forget to turn your page. And really, there is no right or wrong. If you put something and you go, ooh, I don't like that, that just means you're going to add more layers. This scattered branches stencil is a great one for so many projects. I really like the effect it gives. This is Tulip hexagon, and I'm using some light teal paint. I'm also using up my Deco Art Americana paints. I don't use them a lot, so I am intent on using them up. So I don't need to store things that I don't use a lot, but they're perfectly good. So now I have the Tim Holtz faded type stamp. And I take a couple of these stamps and I put some of this on. A lot of that, it's really hard to see right now. But it does add some script in the background. And it's a little forward. Remember, anything that had script in it has been pushed back. Remember, you're just adding interest. None of these elements that I'm adding now are focal images. So then I'm taking some coral paint here, my deck, and I'm just kind of smooshing it on the page. Now I love the addition of the color. I'm not really happy with how it turned out, but it's splotchy and unexpected, and that I like, but it's a bit risky. But I knew I wanted this color in the background. Now, I'm going through this through my drywall tape and kind of softening the edges a little bit. But I know I can stamp or stencil on top of this. So I'm taking the scattered branches one and I'm going over top of this to push back the starkness of that coral that I added. And you can see it pushes it back. And it isn't the first thing you see. But now I have that wonderful color. This stencil is faded type, or halftones, and I'm stenciling with some blue. I got it smeared there, but I was able to take it up with a baby wipe. The reason being, everything underneath is acrylic paint. It's permanent. You can't do that if you're using something that's water activated. So I'm just adding a small scale element here and darker. I want this background to be light, airy, spring-like. This one I believe, I'm not going to use it, I come back. This one is called Fence Grid, I believe. It's one of the slimline stencils, and I will list all the stencils in the description box below, and you can get them either at NinnysNapkins, Amazon, or at the TCW Shopify store. All the affiliate links are in the description box. So I'm adding some turquoise here. It's adding that contrast. It's very stark right now, so it's made the page a little bit darker. But remember, I'm going to be using parts of this. So, and I don't know what parts I'm going to be using. I have had, at this point, no idea at all about what I'm going to do. Then I have this Mandela stencil. I believe this one is called Stained Glass. And I'm using white acrylic paint here. And that's knocking back that dark turquoise. Did you see how that did? And I'm not being too specific about getting exactly the entire mandala. I just want some of the motif. Remember, this isn't a focal image. This is just a detail in the background. Then I put the stencil back on. I wanted it a little bit more opaque. It was a little too faded for me. So I'm replacing the stencil and going over it again. And I'm really liking the look of this. I absolutely love, love, love this Masterboard. Masterboard's great way to play with your products, play with color, experiment. Then I'm taking some lids from medicine bottles, from different containers. I have a whole collection of them. You're going to see that soon. And dipping them in black acrylic paint and just adding circles to the background. I like the addition of the black. You needed that. And the circles. So don't forget to use your DIY mark makers. Here's my container of all lids. Anything that has a lid, different sizes, shapes, I use. So then I'm doing some smaller ones. And then I'm doing the same with gold. Now there's that music paper in the background and there was some gold in there, and I just wanted to introduce some more of that yellow gold and the bling to the Masterboard. When you're close up, you can definitely see the gold circles. And then I wanted to add a little more gold, so I splattered with my thin acrylic gold paint. And then I'm sure to let that dry. Once it's dry, I bring out my window templates and I can move it around and see what would I like to create with this Masterboard. This is a 6x6 template that I have. I've got some wood panels that are 6x6. I have cards that are 6x6. I like that square shape and size. So I decide I'm going to do a card. I had one in mind. I ended up doing two. And I decided that I'm going to make it 5.5 by 5.5 square. And that's going to allow me to have a white border around the 6-inch card. So once I get a straight edge here, I hold it down. I'm using my X-Acto knife on my cutting board, and I'm just cutting it. You've got to go several times because you've got lots of layers of paper there. You want to make sure that it's completely dry. Then I bring out my Tim Holtz cutter and just make sure that it is 5.5 by 5.5. And there we go. You can see the white border. Now I'm gluing this down with gel medium. I'm putting it on the back of the Masterboard, pushing it down, and then I brayer it down to get good contact Now the paper has rippled a little bit, so I'm really working this card. That brayer really helps get it flat. Now, quite honestly, I like these cards just like this, just with this background as a non-occasion card. So I could just totally leave them like this. Love it. But I went through my stash to find what I could use with the background, and I found this Flamingo napkin that I got from NinnysNapkins. It's the perfect shade that goes with the background. I cut out one looking one way, one looking the other way, and decided this is the way I want to go. And I'm just going to pull off the excess plies. I'm putting some of that gel medium on my finger to get the tissue to pull up. Get both layers. And then I'm going to glue this down with my fluid bent medium onto copy paper. And that way it's just going to be easier for me to cut out. And when I want to I don't want the background to come through the flamingo here. So I'm just going to make sure that's dry. And once it's dry, I can come in with scissors and easily cut it out. If you have elements in napkins, you have lots of napkins that you want to do, you could just do a gluing down the napkins, and then you can cut in front of the TV, and then all your focal images are ready to go. I love how this flamingo looks against that background. It looks like I created the background with this napkin in mind, and that wasn't the case. But typically, if you have enough focal images, something's going to work. So I'm gluing this down, and I'm going over the white edge a little bit. I'm using the gel medium to get it down because it's thicker, and I want to make sure that I get good adhesion. And then I'm going to shade around the flamingo. Now I chose to use Prussian blue here, which is the kind of the color, the turquoise in the background. I thought the black was too stark. I end up coming back and doing black. But what do you think of the blue around it? Again, there is no right or wrong. There's just your own personal preference. Now I'm going to colorize the flamingo using my Inktense blocks. I'm just wetting my brush with water, rubbing it into the block, and then painting over the flamingo. I come back in with kind of that coral color, and then I add some light yellow, I add some gesso. Not all that's on the camera. I just like to make the focal image stand out, so I tweak the color just a bit. Once it's dry, I'm coming in and adding some shading on the bird's feathers, and then I go around where I put the blue shading as well. And then I'm shading around the paper. Now, if you want to avoid getting any of that black on the white border, you can shade it before you glue it down. I went to my sentiment pack, short and sweet, and I found the sentiment Seek Balance. Thought it was good to go with the flamingo. And I'm gluing that down. I think I blew up this sentiment, made it a little bit bigger. Then I'm using my Posca pen. I'm outlining around the edge. It kind of tidies up a little bit of the mess that's there. If you don't like the white border, just cut your thing 6 by 6. And then I'm using my white Posca pen to add some doodling. Since this is a card, I didn't want to use any charcoal or anything that would rub off in your hands. And I'm outlining the sentiment here with the black Posca pen, as you'll see in a minute. I totally love this card. I think I might do that on a canvas, and I have more Masterboard to do it. So the next one, I am going with an Easter theme, and I found a bunny template, so I cut it out, shrunk it to the size to fit my card, and I traced around it with my Inktense pencil, and I'm just activating it. I was just going to have the shadow on here. This is where I was going to leave it. But I didn't like the way the circles landed on it, the patterning. So I give it a wash of the light teal color, and then I add some of the turquoise. And basically I've painted it out, although you do see a little bit of that background peeking through. But it was like, okay, my idea didn't work. But I love how it did and how it turned out. And this has all the texture that is in the background. Then I have a bunny, another bunny that I cut out of white copy paper, and I bent its ear down, and I'm painting it white with a little bit of unbleached titanium as well, just to take it a smidge off white. And I'm kind of stippling it on. I don't ever like to have just one solid color. I like mixing my colors. It gives some interest. It's not as flat, I guess. So I'm going to have 2 bunnies on this page, and I'm going to give them tails, round circle tails that kind of mirrors the circle stamping that I did with the caps. And I'm gluing this one over. I could have painted it up just the same way. This gives a little bit of a different effect. And again, I just painted the coral color and the turquoise color, but they were a little too boring for me. So I grab my shelf liner and I dip it into white paint and just stamp on it just to make it a little more interesting. Now I'm shading around the bunnies. So with this Masterboard, I could have made just a whole series of rabbit or Easter cards using these bunnies. And I still could. I could be making more cards. I like making cards using my mixed media art journaling supplies because they have a purpose. I can use them as opposed to making everything in my art journal and it's just in my art journal. I'm shading around these circles. It's a little difficult because it's such a small thing. I should have traced around it with my Posca pen at this time too. So if you want to trace around it, now's the time to do that. I just love those tails. I think they're just super cute. And then I remember I've got some foam squares, so I'm making it 3D. So they kind of stand out. It's not something I do a lot of, but I knew I had them in the stash. So there's my bunny tails. Now I'm shading around the Masterboard And again, if you want to avoid getting it on the white space, you could do this before you glued down the background, the Masterboard background. I didn't like that much white there, so I grabbed the fence grid stencil and just added it there. Of course, I made a mess, so I ended up going back and painting it white. And then I added a little bit more stamping just to make it all work together. I'm going to put some words hop to it, so I'm just putting a wash of gesso underneath so that the black acrylic paint shows up. So that's what you see me doing there. Now I'm just drying it, and I've got the black acrylic paint on my glass tabletop and my wooden blocks, alphabet blocks, and I'm just going to stamp hop to it. So that's how you can get away from a busy background. You can still have your letters show up. And then I'm outlining with my Posca pen. Let me know which card you like best. Do you make masterboards? Would you like to see me create more masterboards? Leave your answers in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you, and I answer every single one. Here's the beautiful masterboard. It's almost a 12 by 12 or 11 by 11 size, and the 2 cards. Now my only problem is, who am I going to send them to? Close-ups of all the projects are following. Until next time, go get creative.